Imagine you're a farmer in the year 1000, toiling away day after day in the fields, doing the same back-breaking work that your parents, grandparents, and generations before you have done. Imagine seeing a glimpse into a future where just one machine could do the work of 1,000 people, where the whole earth is covered in farms, growing huge amounts of food that feed an enormous, interconnected and diverse human population. A system that has grown to support this society, where we communicate using electrically charged silicon crystals and transform the entire surface of the planet and even look outwards into space. But does this insane efficiency come at a cost? Was the old way better? Is our food now lacking in nutrients and full of toxic chemicals? In this video, we're going to talk about organic versus conventional agriculture and help you to decide what is best for you. So let's take some time to define what we mean by organic versus conventional agriculture. Organic food refers to the method of production where farmers follow strict regulations from either the US Department of Agriculture or the European Union or whatever regulatory body exists in their location. Organic farming practices are generally less intensive, they focus more on preserving soil health, and they avoid all synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. And on the other hand, we have conventional produce. These foods are produced outside of the organic regulation while still following standard legal requirements for food safety. And conventional farming may involve the use of synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. In general, the European regulations for organic food are more strict than the United States, but essentially 95% of all of the inputs to the food needs to be coming from organic, natural sources. And another note is it's funny that we call it conventional agriculture when really we've only been producing food this way for the last 100 years. Organic is the method of production that has been used for millennia. So let's take a look at the nutrient quality, comparing conventional produce with organic produce. Which is better? And various studies have been done comparing the nutrient quality of these two different methods of food production. Though the results are sometimes a bit variable due to seasonal variation, different production methods at different farms, and different areas of the planet, studies generally conclude that organic food can be higher in certain plant antioxidant compounds called polyphenols, and in some cases can have higher levels of vitamin C and carotenoids, which are what our body can either use as antioxidants or convert them into vitamin A. And overall, while organic food does have some higher levels of certain nutrients, it's unclear whether this is nutritionally relevant, because on paper it's higher, but if we're just eating enough fruit and vegetables, we're going to be getting all of the nutrients that we need anyway, whether we're eating organic or conventional produce. And it's always important to look at actual human outcome data, because it's very interesting. Maybe a certain food has more nutrients, but does it actually lead to better health outcomes? And unfortunately for this question, we just don't have enough data comparing organic versus conventional foods to know whether we can say one is better than the other. So more research is definitely needed. But it's important to keep in mind that many things contribute to the quality of our diet, not just whether we're eating organic or conventional produce. So like I always say, it's more important to focus on the quality of our overall dietary pattern, focusing on including more health-promoting, unprocessed whole foods, rather than worrying about whether they're coming from organic or conventional sources. Wherever you're getting them from, they're going to be supporting you and improving your health. And considering that only 10% of Americans meet the recommended intake of fruits and vegetables, we really shouldn't be worrying about whether they're organic or not. We need to be eating more fruits and vegetables. So when it comes to the impact on the environment of organic versus conventional agriculture, there's a few areas that we need to consider. The first being pesticides. Organic farming doesn't use any synthetic pesticides or herbicides, while conventional agriculture relies on these to protect the crops. However, it is important to note that organic farming can still use organic pesticides and herbicides, which often have less research on them than the conventional synthetic ones. So just because something's an organic chemical doesn't really tell us anything about its effect on our health. And it's important to remember that strict regulations are in place for both organic and conventional agriculture on how much pesticide residue is allowed in the produce. However, again, unfortunately, this is an area where there isn't a whole lot of solid research, so we can't say too much about the health effects of consuming these pesticides. It's important to know about the maximum residue levels that are allowed in produce. They do studies which are generally done on lab animals, and they find the dose at which they don't observe any adverse effect in these lab animals. And then they take this dose where there was no adverse effect observed at all, then they divide that by 100, and that's the maximum allowed level that's allowed on produce. So if you are worried about pesticides, you can know that even if there is some residue on your food, it's hundreds of times lower than what could even potentially cause some harm. Data from the US Department of Agriculture shows that 99.5% of produce falls below this maximum allowed limit. And another note on this is that organic foods aren't always tested in the same way to check the amount of pesticide residues on them. In some cases, organic foods may have even higher levels of pesticides than conventionally grown foods. And as we talked about, just because a pesticide is organic doesn't necessarily mean that it's any better for our health. And so now we've talked about pesticides, let's get into the wider environmental implications of farming organic versus conventional. I found it super interesting researching this because it's definitely not what I expected to see. A global meta-analysis of 742 different agricultural systems covering 90 unique foods concluded that actually conventional agriculture is generally better for the environment in many different ways. Organic agriculture consistently performs worse than conventional agriculture in terms of the amount of land used, because organic agriculture has lower yields than conventional agriculture. So to produce the same amount of food, we need more land. And because of this and the way that organic practices are often managed, they also have higher potential for nutrient runoff, such as into rivers, that pollutes rivers, then goes down into the ocean and causes what is called eutrophication, which is where excess nutrients in the water produces growth of algae, which use up all the oxygen in the water, creating what are called dead zones, which is area where there's no oxygen in the water and no marine life can exist. As well as this, organic agriculture typically emits more carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases than conventional agriculture. The only environmental category where organic farming produced consistently better results than conventional is in terms of energy use. And that's because it takes a lot of energy to produce all of the synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides that are used in conventional agriculture. But overall, this isn't huge because in terms of global energy use, agriculture only accounts for 2%. However, there is a lot of ongoing debate in this field because organic systems are less intense on the environment in terms of biodiversity. And there have been studies, for example, showing that populations of insects have drastically reduced over the last 50 years. And some of that may be due to the intense use of pesticides in conventional agriculture. So there is debate whether we should use intensive conventional agriculture, but in a smaller area of land, or whether we should use less intense organic agriculture that protects biodiversity, but use a larger amount of land. Let me know down in the comments below what you think is best. And so from looking through all of this research, what it makes me think about is that maybe the best solution is a combination of these two systems. In the research, some foods are more environmentally friendly when grown organically, and some are more environmentally friendly when grown conventionally. So potentially we could have a hybrid system where we take the best out of each of these systems and apply them together to have the best environmental outcomes. And the final point for the environment is the most important thing to consider is not whether your food's organic or conventional, but to consider what food is on your plate in the first place. For example, worrying about that potato that you're having with your steak, if it's conventional or organic, is pointless because the environmental footprint of that steak is hundreds of times more. and vastly eclipses any potential differences that there could ever be between organic and conventional agriculture. So finally, when it comes to putting together all of this information with what we can actually apply into our lives, considering that organic produce typically has a higher price tag, has less variety, and is less accessible to many people, and considering that overall intake of fruit and vegetables is much more important than whether we're eating organic or conventional, for many individuals and families, prioritizing a healthy dietary pattern composed of mostly whole foods, whether organic or conventional, is a more practical and impactful approach when it comes to improving our health, rather than solely focusing on the question of whether food is organic or conventional. Considering that the average person isn't eating anywhere near close to the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables, we should be focusing on including more of these in our plate wherever they're coming from. So in conclusion, when making food choices, it's important to consider a holistic picture of our food. We can look at the nutrient content, the environmental impacts, but the most important thing is to focus on our overall dietary pattern. Focusing on including more beneficial whole foods is a win-win for everyone. And while organic food might not be the nutritional powerhouse that some people make it out to be, there's still valid reasons to eat organic. Whether you want to support your local farmers, support regenerative agriculture that's working to improve biodiversity, or if you just prefer the taste. Personally, I purchase organic products when it is affordable to do so. Sometimes they can be a similar price to conventional, and in that case, I'll generally buy them. But if the price difference is a lot, which it often is for lots of fruits and veggies, I just won't worry about whether it's organic or not. A lot of the debates and confusion around nutrition are taking us away from the most important thing, which is just most people aren't eating enough whole foods. And in terms of the environment, if you really do care about the environmental impact of your food, it's more important to consider what is on your plate rather than whether it's organic or conventional, as animal products have a much larger environmental footprint than plant-based foods. So I hope you found this video interesting and thought-provoking. I know I found it super interesting researching it because it definitely challenged some of the ideas that I had around organic versus conventional agriculture. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe for more nutrition content. Leave your comments down below, I'd love to hear what you think. And if you've enjoyed this video and you're inspired to include more whole foods in your diet, check out this video where I talk more about the benefits of eating a healthy dietary pattern to help support your body with inflammation so you can feel your best.